runway 7, hold, correction, runway 12, hold, short, runway 7.
Every day, millions of people take to the skies. It's easy, though, to take for granted how extraordinarily complex our nation's air infrastructure is. 45,000 flights a day, 3 million travelers moving around 29 million square miles of airspace. Even more remarkable is that it's been 15 years since the last fatal commercial airline crash, when a Continental Airlines flight to Buffalo entered an aerodynamic stall and crashed into a house, killing all 49 passengers and crew. There are signs that the golden era of flying could be coming to an end. In the past year, the number of close calls between commercial airliners has surged to nearly 3 per week. In some cases, collisions that could kill hundreds or thousands of people were avoided by good luck and mere seconds. So what's changed? Well, it turns out a lot has. Manufacturing issues, government incompetence, the COVID pandemic, absurd diversity policies. These are just some of the many concerning developments and too much to cover in a single episode. So we've decided to just focus on air traffic control, the people who govern air traffic in the world's largest and busiest airspace. We're traveling thousands of miles across the country, mostly by airplane, by the way, to figure out what has changed and why it matters. I'm Stu Burguiere, and this is Blaze Originals. The first stop on our journey was Chicago, the land of funny hot dogs, deep dish pizza, and Chicago O'Hare, an airport that 74 million of you passed through last year. It's one of the busiest airspaces in the country and exactly where we needed to start. So you've been in this business a long time.
I've been in aviation my entire life.
Rob Mark is a pilot who covers aviation news at his website, jetwine.com. He was an air traffic controller right here in the Chicago area.
It's the ultimate mind game. It's all up here because you got to try to keep the picture of all these airplanes moving in different places, at different altitudes, at different speeds.
It's like a massive puzzle. But
yeah, it is. It really is.
Today, the FAA has about 1,000 fewer fully certified controllers than it did just 10 years ago, even though air traffic has increased. Major hubs and critical facilities are extremely understaffed. The FAA's Inspector General says 77% of critical facilities are staffed below the agency's 85% threshold, including the New York Terminal Radar Approach Control Site, which manages planes in and out of New York City's airports. That facility only had 54% of the fully trained staffers it needed last year. And callouts can snarl air travel across the entire country.
Half of the controllers in the country are working 6-day weeks, 10-hour days, and it's mandatory. I did some of that for a while when I was still a controller, and I got to tell you, it's a killer.
The shortage has caused delays and cancellations. It's led airlines to reduce flights to some cities because of congestion. And worst of all, as the relative number of controllers has declined, the number of near collisions between commercial aircraft has surged to nearly 3 per week.
We have the largest and the most complex aviation system in the world, and it works really well. But every so often, something just takes a wrong turn.
The examples are hard to believe. In April, air traffic controllers at Washington Reagan told a Southwest pilot to turn into the path of a JetBlue flight that was cleared to take off.
Stop, Southwest 2937, stop!
The same week, at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York, a Swiss Air flight aborted takeoff when 4 other planes were cleared to cross the runway.
7 Kilo Heavy, recheck takeoff, traffic on the runway.
The list goes on. A FedEx 767 coming within 100 feet of landing on top of a Southwest flight on a foggy night in Austin. A private jet passing just 100 feet above a Southwest flight sitting on the runway in San Diego. And controllers in Portland, Oregon, missing an incorrect readback from an Alaska Airlines flight that banked right into the path of another jet.
There are many other incidents that happen on a weekly basis in our system that don't make the nightly news. It's because some controller or some pilot caught it before it got out of hand.
Within days of the close calls at Washington, Reagan, and JFK, the FAA Administrator, Mike Whitaker, issued a directive increasing the amount of rest controllers should get between shifts. But it did nothing to deal with the underlying problem, the shortage of controllers.
The warning signs are there, and we all wonder, is anybody listening?
For many people, airplanes are kind of scary. You're crammed in an aluminum tube, traveling at 400 miles per hour and 40,000 feet above the ground. But sometimes you have to do it. And so, we did. Our next stop was just over 1,000 miles from the first, about a 2.5-hour flight from Chicago to South Florida. It was here where last summer, an air traffic controller in Miami instructed an Allegiant Airlines flight to turn east at 23,000 feet, right into the path of a Gulfstream business jet at the same altitude. Luckily, both planes got automated alerts and narrowly avoided a mid-air collision. 3 months earlier, a controller put a Delta flight on a collision course with a Spirit Airlines flight in an approach to Fort Lauderdale's airport. And 2 months after that, a Spirit Airlines flight came within a few hundred feet of a cargo plane at Miami because of a mistake by an air traffic controller. But that's not why we went down there. We're on our way to talk to Bob Poole. This is a guy who's been covering air traffic control for 30 years. He went to MIT, super smart guy, helped found the Reason Foundation. And little did I know, before this trip, he's actually one of my personal lifelong heroes, because this is the guy who invented TSA PreCheck. This is the guy who invented the express lanes on the highway that get you past all the traffic. This is the guy. So, I don't know, the interview may start with a hug. I'm not sure. But either way, we're gonna know a heck of a lot more about transportation when this is over. Hey, Bob.
Welcome.
How are you? Stu, great to see you. Thanks so much for having us.
Glad to do it.
Yeah, this is great. No one knows more about America's air traffic control system than Bob Poole.
All those are air traffic control things and file drawers. I have 2.5 file drawers of air traffic control stuff.
Incredible. While putting together this episode, one of the things that struck us the most was how outdated our air traffic control system is. Let's start with just the technology of air traffic control.
Right.
I think the average person would think we're a highly advanced country.
It's not the case for air traffic control.
Can you give me some concrete examples of the things they're doing that I think most Americans wouldn't even believe?
Well, one is paper flight strips. I mean,
Paper flight strips.
This is in control towers. For a
Yeah,
second,
yeah,
let me
Yeah, that'd be great.
show you one.
Today, like in 2024, air traffic controllers still use paper flight strips to track planes.
It comes off a little printer at the controller's workstation, and this one is quite recent. It's from last fall. It's Delta Airlines, that first thing there. It's a 737-9. It's going from SFO to Minneapolis-St. Paul. And these other things are little waypoints that the departure is going to involve.
The FAA has been trying to replace paper flight strips with an electronic system since 1983. But being a government project, it's behind schedule and over budget. Is air traffic control, are they using GPS?
Yeah, no, they are. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that they've done pretty well, just pronounced ADS-B. So that system went live about 5 or 6 years ago. So it tracks from GPS satellites the position and gives the update instead of radar, but radar update is about once a minute for the actual location of the plane. ADS-B, it's every 3 seconds. But what they have not done, they did not apply this at all to their oceanic airspace. FAA is responsible for part of Caribbean ocean space, across the Atlantic Ocean, not the North Atlantic tracks, which are NAV Canada and the British NATS service. But if you go from Miami to London, that's FAA responsibility for most of it, a good part of the way. And all huge swath of the Pacific, practically all the way to Japan and to the South Pacific, and most of the way to Australia is all FAA oceanic airspace. That is not monitored at all. There's no radar over the oceans. Right.
It
never has been.
I think it seems like you don't want planes to collide over oceans either.
No, you don't want them to collide over oceans. So what they do is basically the planes keep track of where they are by inertial navigation, which is, approximate, it's pretty good. And they report their positions from their systems to controllers through high-frequency radio. Air traffic providers in countries that want to use that satellite-based system have to subscribe and pay a fee to get the downloads. FAA could go like that and sign up for this across the whole oceanic Pacific airspace. God only knows why they haven't.
Let me ask you about another tech issue that has to be a conspiracy theory that I've read about. It can't be true. It can't be true.
All right.
Please tell me it's not true, Bob. I've read that they still utilize floppy disks.
Yep.
No. Please tell me
that's in a report that came out last year.
The report, which is public and published in November, is horrifying. The FAA uses tracking beacons so old that they can't get replacement antennas. In some cases, they're using pre-digital 50-year-old radar system with sparse replacement parts. Those with the expertise to fix them have aged out of the workforce. The FAA uses more than 1,000 instrument landing systems that are no longer supported by the manufacturer. And amazingly, the FAA also lacks the intellectual property rights to build replacement parts for the archaic technology.
This big safety report got virtually no attention in the general media and only very limited attention in the aviation media.
For his part, Poole recommends separating air traffic control from government bureaucracy, like Canada did. One of the constant conversations has been going on for as long as I can remember. When I would think of Canada, I would be using them as the bad example. With the FAA and air traffic control, this is reverse. Like Canada is the example.
And the way this came about, it was very much like the U.S. system. It was behind the times technologically. It was starved for money. So the stakeholders, the airlines in Canada, the controllers and other union people got together. They looked particularly at New Zealand, which had taken it out of the government. That's the very first one in 1985. Germany had already done it and a couple of others in Europe. And they said, this is a way superior model. And it's been just a tremendous success story ever since.
Poole worked with the Clinton, Bush, and Trump administrations to overhaul the air traffic control organization and save it from the FAA. But despite getting close every time, it repeatedly died in Congress.
All the government employee unions, other than the controllers unions, opposed our bill in 2016 to 2018. They saw this as the slippery slope. If we let this go, then all kinds of other things the government now does will be done outside of the government, and we'll all lose our jobs.
In the interest of keeping our jobs, it was time again to travel. This time about 1,700 miles to Denver. Our flight took us into airspace where, according to the New York Times, an air traffic controller directed a United plane to go dangerously close to an American Airlines flight. The pilots avoided collision by yanking the American Airlines flight up hundreds of feet after an alarm went off in the cockpit. Luckily for us, we avoided that kind of drama. The worst part was dealing with the Miami airport. But even then, we still made it to the Denver suburbs, where we met with our next guest, Sean Nation, a lawyer with the Mountain State Legal Foundation. He's currently suing the FAA.
Hey, Stu. Hey, Sean Nation. Nice to meet you.
Sean, great to see you, man.
Please come on in.
Thanks for having us. Traditionally, how has the FAA screened its candidates for air traffic control?
Sure. So up until 2014, they used a merits-based test and partnered with various colleges through what was called the Collegiate Training Initiative, CTI. And at the end of that, they would take a test called the ATCs, which is, the government loves an acronym.
Yes.
But it was a merits-based test, but the permanent bureaucracy at the FAA decided that it was producing too many white men to become air traffic controllers. They decided to change the hiring process and introduce a new first step, which was called the biographical questionnaire.
Was this like something where it was obvious? Were they saying, hey, you know, what is your skin color, and narrowing people down that way?
So they used proxy questions. For instance, my kind of favorite example is they asked, what was your worst subject in high school? And if you answered science, you got 15 points. What you can look at are Department of Education statistics, and you can see that there is an achievement gap between particularly African American and Caucasian high school students.
Okay. The questionnaire is extremely difficult, and the questions are rated differently. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. Failure rates were extremely high. Do we know of any qualified minority candidates that were unable to get through this?
Unfortunately, yes. There were a number, and I don't know what that number is. It's a non-zero number of African American candidates who were well qualified, who had passed the ATSAT, the merits-based test, and were denied.
I mean, how is this legal?
It's not, is the short answer. So that's why we brought our lawsuit.
We now know that there is a shortage of air traffic controllers.
And we have a reported controller shortage of about 2,000. We represent a certified class of over 900 would-be air traffic controllers who were denied the opportunity to become air traffic controllers because they had the wrong skin color.
I feel like becoming an air traffic controller is hard. Figuring out that we should not judge people on the basis of the color of their skin is easy. We somehow can't figure this out anymore.
I would agree. You know, luckily, I think we have brave individuals like Andrew Brigida and Matthew Cook who are going to stand up and represent the others.
You mentioned Andrew Brigida, one of the people involved here in the lawsuit. Well, who's to say that maybe he just wasn't good at this? Maybe he wasn't a good candidate.
On the merits-based test, he got a perfect score.
A perfect score.
Perfect score. He went to school to become an air traffic controller, took the merits-based test, and then the term that the FAA used is they flushed those people. They flushed them out of the hiring process.
Flushed them out of the hiring process.
That is, flushed is the term that the FAA uses.
Our next trip was an obvious one. We had to go to Phoenix and take the biographical assessment with Andrew himself. He couldn't pass it then, but could he pass it now? Like everywhere else we went, Phoenix was also the site of a recent close call. On August 7th, a controller at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport told American Flight 1388 to take off and turn right after departing. The pilot incorrectly repeated the instructions back to the controller, who didn't catch the mistake. Upon taking off, the plane banked left directly into the path of a Southwest Airlines flight. Once again, thankfully, they didn't crash. So you take the technical test, you get 100%. Then you take the biographical test. How do you do on that?
So I ended up failing.
Now, we have the test here.
Okay.
And now, you haven't taken it since 2014?
I haven't seen the test. I haven't taken it since 2014.
This is a chance to relive your life. Do you want to give it another shot?
Let's do it.
Question number one, pretty simple. How would you describe your ideal job? How would you answer that?
I would click ability to decide for myself what to do and how to do it.
Okay, and that's because you're what, a self-starter?
Yeah, you want to be able to show that you don't need to rely on a manager or somebody like that to do your job.
Yeah, even if that's not true, that's what I would pick. Right?
Yeah.
Like, even if I was the laziest person in the world, I would pick A on that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's click it and see how many points you get. You got 0 points for that.
0 points.
0 points, okay. Any questions related to work ethic, attitude, and so on, Andrew was striking out once again. You got 0 points for that. Things started getting interesting once the questions started getting weird. Question 26. The number of months I was unemployed during the 3 years immediately before applying to this job goes from 0, you were employed the entire time, up to 7 or more months.
Correct. And I chose 0 for this because I've had a job since I was 16.
Okay, let's see. The best option was B, 1 to 2, and that was worth 10 points. Mm-hmm. So they want you to just be slightly unemployed?
Slightly unemployed, yeah.
The drama's building. You have a score of 98 out of 179 so far.
So far.
You need to get to 114, so this is it. This is your half-court shot at the buzzer.
Yep.
That's a weird question. 62. How have you planned your work activities at work, school, or in other similar situations? I don't even know what they're asking, honestly.
Well, I assume this one was more of a time management situation. I always made exact and detailed plans.
All right, let's see.
That was worth no points.
That was like, you took the half quarter at the buzzer, but the buzzer had already sounded. Okay, so there you go. You have failed. You've missed it. 98 out of 179 is your score.
Yep.
How does it make you feel?
Not shocked.
That was crazy. Amazing. I'm gonna go talk to your lawyer, Michael Pearson. He's here, I think, somewhere. Let's see. Michael, can I grab you for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Just talking to Andrew about everything that's gone on.
Mm-hmm.
We know that they say they've solved all these problems now in the FAA. They're not doing this stuff anymore. Is that true? Do we have any idea what's going on now?
So I believe the FAA's gerrymandering the hiring process. I believe what's happened is the FAA has just moved the questions from the BABQ into the new aptitude test. And the reason I believe that is because these students don't get a grade right away. This is an objective multiple choice test. If in fact this test is what they say it is, an aptitude test, they should get a grade right away.
Right.
And they're not getting that. So
something's happening.
Something's fishy. It takes 4 to 6 weeks.
You know, speaking to Andrew, I mean, this is a smart guy. He's been able to
Very
do
much so.
Great things with his life,
Right.
but I mean, they took a giant chunk of his life away.
And in this case, Andrew was a victim of bigotry and racism supported by the federal government. And to have your dream crushed that way, I can't imagine it.
By day 5, we were nearing the end of our journey. There was one last place to go. And despite the airport hotels and the travel delays and the Snickers bars for dinner, we were still hopeful that someone, somewhere, might have an actual plan to fix the FAA. You know, it's the strangest thing. You're talking about all of the weaknesses in air traffic control, and yet you're doing it and talking about it often at 40,000 feet, which sounds like a terrible idea, and it is. Our final destination, the land of solutions, Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. And of all of our travel challenges, getting into the building proved to be the hardest one of all.
They told us there was a ramp. There's no ramp. That's not a thing. There's no ramp. We're going to be walking up 14 flights of stairs with all the gear.
After pushing our baggage up and down Constitution Avenue, and Capitol Hill, by the way, is an actual hill, we finally found the ramp and the elevator we were looking for. Senator.
How are you, Stu?
How are you? It's good to see you. How's everything?
Going great.
Great. Thanks for taking time to do this.
No, thank you.
Let's talk about air traffic control, because you actually have policy ideas to make this better. First, what's wrong with it?
Well, what's wrong with it is that they're utilizing identity politics as a supplement for, and in some cases even a complete substitute for qualifications-based hiring decisions.
In 2022, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg announced a new recruitment goal for the FAA. 3% of its workforce should be disabled. And not just any form of disabled, but, quote, individuals who suffer from total deafness in both ears, total blindness, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric disabilities, and dwarfism, end quote. You wrote a letter to the FAA about this specific thing. What was their response?
Yeah, so I wrote a letter to FAA Administrator Whitaker explaining that, you know, this is a problem. Almost every adult American, even those who suffer from disabilities, you can almost always find something that someone can do. But there are some jobs that you might not want to assign to someone with certain impairments.
The FAA never responded to his letter. We reached out too and asked if they'd provide someone to discuss the controller shortage, the biographical assessment, the rise in close calls, and what they've been doing to keep our skies safe. Unlike Senator Lee, we did get a response. They declined to go on camera, but provided a written statement about how hiring more controllers is a top priority, before adding that they, quote, implement engaging hiring campaigns to reach more youth from diverse backgrounds. Let's talk about the FAA. You wrote a bill to try to improve it.
Yes.
What can we do?
So yeah, I've introduced legislation to make sure that the air traffic control hiring decisions are based on qualifications, that they're not based on identity politics, that the air traffic controller tests, the aptitude test that they take, utilize peer-reviewed, accepted, merit-based considerations.
So what stops it from happening?
They say that possession is sometimes 9/10 of the law. And something similar could be said of people who run federal agencies like the FAA. If they're in that seat, they're getting to make the rules.
This is an issue, though, that I think should have bipartisan support. Even, I mean, we've seen Patty Murray has been active on this in the past. It feels like this is all lining up to actually happen, but it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen in part because many people are not aware of it. And that's why I'm so pleased whenever any member of the news media chooses to report on it. This shouldn't be difficult at all.
The reality is, flying in the United States is still very safe. But air safety isn't something we can or should take for granted. It's an incredibly complex system, more than most realize. The shortage of controllers is real, in a job that requires constant focus. It's not good if they're showing up to work fatigued and short-staffed. The fact that ideologues attempted to rig the hiring process to deny qualified applicants on the basis of race, that bureaucrats are stalling on obvious modernization proposals, and that the administration is pretending everything is fine when there are 3 close calls every week. Those are canaries in a coal mine. It raises the most important question of all. What will have to happen for our leaders to do something? Will they take the initiative, or will they wait until a close call becomes a human tragedy?
Stu! Stu!
What?
It's time to wake up. You ready to do America?
I hate you.
Get out of... Your camera ready, Stu. Let's go.
Get...
How you feeling this morning?
Got a little cup of water in case Stu doesn't want to wake up.
Stu, wake up, wake up, wake up! Wake up, Stu! You ready to do America, Stu?
No! You should walk out the door. You should leave right now. You should go before that camera breaks.
Time for Stu to get woken up again. It's time to wake up. We got a shoot to go to, Stu. Are you ready to do America?
Started sleeping with my shoes on. Let's go. Beautiful view. Look at that. That's incredible. Got a nice parking lot here. Off in the distance, you got a Wendy's and a McDonald's.
Wow.
That's how we chose this particular hotel location. How close are they to Wendy's and McDonald's locations? That's the way I roll.